Let's loom knit a headband. Okay, so regular viewers will know that I've recently acquired some knitting looms. This is my largest knitting loom. It's that kind of size, but that's not how you measure looms. The looms I have all have even numbers of pegs, which is going to make it easy for doing things like ribbing and that sort of stuff. This one has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36 pegs. 40 pegs would be preferable, I suspect, for my head. But we're going to see if we can knit a headband on this that'll actually function. The point is more to sort of practice the stitches and to give you guys an idea of how loom knitting works rather than creating something practical. think of this as like an overgrown swatch. So we're having a go, we're learning the stitches, we're seeing how it works before I invest in larger looms and looms in other gauges and that kind of thing. So let's flip the camera around and get started. Okay, so we're going to attempt to make a headband on this loom. Not entirely convinced it's going to fit because this is my largest loom, but it's more of a child hat sized loom, so we'll see. With this gauge, this is large gauge, so 5/8 of an inch between the pegs, from like the centre point to the centre point. So you really want sort of bulky or chunky yarn. I'm going to be attempting to get gauge with strands held together, which is, not ideal, but we'll work with what we've got. So I'm going to hold probably 2 strands of this one and a strand of that one together and see how that works. So I'll start with the cast on. I am very much learning with the loom knitting, and I will at some point get more looms so that I've got more options of sizes that I can do. But, just sorting out the yarn from the middle of this navy skein. This I think is an acrylic and this is a wool. They're just leftovers in my stash from other projects. So I'm just using stuff up rather than buying new at the moment, whilst I'm still sort of finding my feet with loom knitting. So yeah, just going to pop those out of the way. So we've got 3 strands to hold together. That's probably going to be just about right. So I'm just going to get my sticky outy peg towards me. I'm going to put a slip knot over that whilst I cast on. It's just going to hold everything in place. So, I'll just do that a bit more slowly so you can see how I do my slip knot. So I'm holding my working tail in my hand, I'm going to wrap my yarn around 2 fingers and I'm going to cross it over underneath. So I've got 2 loops side by side. I'm going to take my finger under that one, grab the back one and pull it off, and there I have my slip knot. It's the same way as I do it for crochet. I'll just use a hook instead of my finger for crochet. I'm going to pop that on this peg and just pull to tighten it. You don't want it too tight because you're going to be taking it off in a few rows time, and I could put a marker on there, which I will do. Just going to grab a marker from my little box of wonders that I picked up in Iceland because I'd forgotten to pack stuff. Okay, so we're going to go with just a stitch marker, whop it over that. I've seen people use elastic bands and that kind of stuff, so yeah, whatever you've got that can fit over the peg. So we're going to do a fairly standard cast on as far as I understand it. So we're going to E-wrap the pegs. I'm working this way around, you can work that way around, it's fine, it comes out the same. So E-wrap, we're going to go behind the peg and across the front. try not to get tangled. I'm normally doing this in an armchair. So I'm going to E-wrap. So from above, the yarn looks like a little letter E, lowercase e, around the peg. And we're going to do this all the way around until we get back to here, and then we're going to go all around, the way around again. So twice round, 2 times round with the E-wrap on all of the pegs, and to give us our cast on. You need 2 loops on the peg to create a stitch. Most beginner videos are going to recommend that you use just the 1 strand of yarn of the right weight, and yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm just kind of hoping that this is going to be thick enough. It should be. Essentially, I am practicing stitches. That's the phase of loom knitting that I am in at the moment. Okay, so I'll come back to you when I'm ready to actually finish the cast on. So I've now got 2 loops on each of my pegs. So I'm going to take the lower loop and ease it over and off the peg. And this can be a little bit tricky, particularly if, like me, you're still learning and therefore have a bit of a death grip on the yarn. So there we go, just ease that over, and that locks the working yarn in place, so I can just let that do its thing now. And we're going to work our way around the loom, taking all of those bottom loops over the top loop and off. So I'm using the tool that came with the loom, it's this little hook tool. It's shaped much like a weeding tool for cricket, so if you don't have a hook to hand, if you lose it or if it breaks, but you have access to cricket weeding tools, they are a bit more sturdy than I've heard some of the ones that come with the looms can be. But I think all the looms come with a hook, or at least there's one in the set if you're buying more than 1 loom at a time. So we're just going to work our way around the loom and knit off, which is this process of lifting the bottom loop over and off. In loom knitting parlance, they call it knitting off, all the way around until we're back at that first peg. Okay, so there we have cast on all the way around the loom, ready to start knitting with this marked peg here. Now we're going to start with rib stitch. We're going to use a 2x2 rib for at least a few rows. I am making this up as I go along, I'm not following a pattern. So we'll do rib for as long as I feel like it, and then we'll see if I decide to do a different stitch or not. So 2x2 rib, 2 knit, 2 purl. That should be fine for this because we're on even numbers. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 24, 36. 36 divided by 2 is 15, 16, 17, 18. So that's 9 if we divide by 4. So yeah, divisible by 4. So we're fine. So 2x2 rib stitch. So you do want to count that it's divisible by 4 to get 2x2 in. So you know, do what you need to do for your numbers. The knit stitch in loom knitting, there are multiple ways of forming it. So you can do an E-wrap like we did for the cast on. That will give you a twisted knit stitch. You can do a flat knit, so you just hold the yarn flat across the pegs and lift the lower loop over the top loop and off. So that's going to be quite a tight knit stitch because there's not much of this yarn going into the stitch. You can do a U-wrap, which is where you wrap the yarn so that it looks like a U from above, so sort of halfway around the peg, and again knit off from beneath over the top. That's going to give you a bit more yarn in the stitch. Or you can do a true knit stitch where you go you wrap your yarn, and then you take the yarn from below, and then you scoop the top yarn under, bring it through so it makes a new loop, and then you swap the old loop on the peg for the new loop that you've just formed, which is going to give you the most yarn in the stitch. So that's the stitch that I'm going to use. So you wrap it, go from underneath the bottom, scoop the yarn through to get to loop. It's obviously a little bit more awkward where I've got multiple strands, and then we're going to swap the old loop for the new loop. So that's 2 net stitches done. For the 2 pearls, we're going to take the yarn below this loop, and we're going to go in from above and scoop the yarn like we did for the knit stitch to make a loop, and again we're going to swap the old loop for the new loop. So it's like the reverse of the knit stitch. So this is partly why I've chosen to do the knit stitch the way I have, because it's more similar to the purl stitch. But also it gives a bit more yarn in the stitch, so that gives me a better chance of being able to wear this when it's done. I might not be able to, but we'll see. So knit. I believe they call this is the true knit stitch in Loom knitting parlance. Just go from under, scoop the yarn, and swap for the hoops. For purl, you go from over, so from the top. I am obviously slightly cat-handed with this still, as I am still learning. Hopefully I'm getting everything in shot. Okay, so I'm going to carry on with this all the way around the loom. I'm going to do a few rows and I'll come back to you and show you where we're at. But hopefully it gives you a sense of the knit stitch and the purl stitch on the knitting loom. I will obviously release this knot here, probably when I get around to the end of this round. It's only really needs to be there whilst you're casting on. It doesn't need to stay on once you've got a few rows or rounds of knitting on your loom. Okay, so I've worked a few rows of ribbing that you can see here, and I've started to work stocking stitch. You can see how the circumference of the rib stitch is much smaller than the loom. That happens with the loom knitting. It hoops in as it comes off the loom, which is why it's a little bit of a guesstimate with the yarn one, certainly for me at the moment, holding yarns together, because I'm still learning what works for the looms I've got. And yeah, this is why I'm thinking possibly might be a little snug for me, because I've got quite a large head. So yeah, so I'm working on stocking stitch. I've measured my ears. My ears are not quite 3 inches, but almost 3 inches from lobe to tip. So going to aim for about 3 inches of stocking stitch and then another few rows of ribbing. So stocking stitch is just knit stitch all the way around. With loom knitting, whether you're working in the round or in the flat, because you can absolutely work in the flat on a loom, even in a round one, you're always working on the right side of the fabric. So there's no wrong rows. So for stocking stitch, you're not doing any purls at all, much like when you're knitting around on needles. So I'm going to keep doing that until I've got the length that I'm after, and then we'll come back and have a look at casting off once I've got the other ribbing done on the other side. Okay, so we've got a few rows of ribbing, 2 and a bit inches of stocking stitch, and a few more rows of ribbing, and we're ready to cast off. I have gone slightly shorter than I thought just because the balance looked a little bit weird, but the full width of the headband will still be wider than my ears, and like I say, there's no guarantee it's going to fit me. So we're going to do a yarn over cast off, at least that's what it's called in my Loom knitting book, which is this book. So that's meant to give a stretchier edge, so we're going with that one. I'm sure there are other stretchy cast-offs because there are multiples of these sorts of things in needle knitting, so I'd imagine the same would be true for loom knitting. So the casting off process does involve moving stitches from one peg to another, and it can get a little bit tight at times. So again, that may be partly due to my death grip on the yarn that I have at the moment as a beginner loom knitter. I'm sure that'll improve over time. So the first step to this cast off is we're going to knit off the first peg, and then we're going to yarn over that peg. So you wrap it clockwise, then you knit over and you knit the next stitch, oh, go on, there we go, over we go. Then you move this stitch to this peg. So because we've just worked that one, there is a bit of give in that stitch to enable you to move it onto the other peg. The other way around is going to be a lot more tricky. Then you knit over. So the pauses are me just checking the instructions. And then we repeat the process again. So you wrap, and then you knit off, and then it says you work the next stitch, but there's quite a gap there, so I'm going to move this stitch back to this peg just so that when I move the next stitch over, it's not going so far. It doesn't say to do that in the instructions, it just makes sense to me to do that. Okay, so knit this stitch. In the other cast off you do that as well, you move the stitch back, so I'm assuming it's the same. So I've knit that one off, move it over to this peg, and hopefully my hands aren't getting in the way and we're staying in shot and all that kind of thing. So we're going to knit off there, we're going to wrap the peg, we're going to knit, we're going to knit off, and then I'm going to move that stitch back to the peg it came from. I'm going to knit that one off, move that one over there. As I'm working in multiple strands, it sometimes is a little tricky to get all strands over the peg, but there we go. Okay, so knit off, yarn over, knit off, move that one back. Over there. Okay, so I'm going to keep doing this until I get back to to the end of the round, so nearly fully cast off, and we'll show you what it looks like at that point. Okay, so I've just got a few left to do, so I'm just going to cast off these last few stitches. So knit off, transfer to the previous peg, making sure we get all the loops over. Obviously if you're using one strand that'd be a bit easier. Knit off, yarn over, knit off, put it back on that one, okay, knit off, transfer, knit off, yarn over, knit off. So we're on the last peg, so we've done all our main bits of cast off stitching. So now we're going to E-wrap. So we're making that little letter E around this peg, so that way it's going to get that there. We're going to knit over. Why is that one tighter than everything else? Oh, I split the yarn with the hook, that's why. And then I'm going to cut my yarn, and pull that tail end through, and we're off the loom. There we have our headband. Now, as you can see, it does look a little bit on the small side. It will need a bit of a block because of the way that the stitches are on the loom. A lot of the YouTubers that do more loom knitting than I do recommend stretching the stitches, so hand blocking effectively, and then blocking as well. Now, I may be able to get this on my head, but it will obviously pull the stitches out a bit, so it'll look a little bit more like that, which may or may not be an issue. But it's off the loom. It's definitely a child-sized thing though, and you can see there, child-sized. So yeah, so I need to get a bigger loom if I'm going to make hats and headbands for myself, or cowls even, because I'd have trouble getting that around my neck, over the head around the neck, but we'll see. So yeah, so I'll see if I can get it on. And I'll weave in the ends, and then we'll have a little bit of a chat about the finished result. Okay, so I can get it on. It does cover my ears, so I mean, it'll do the job. It's a little snug, but that's not necessarily a bad thing for a headband. But you can see that the stitches are kind of stretched out while it's on, so it's not ideal for my head size. But it'll do the job. I think I'd have a more comfortable fit on a larger loom. There's only going to be a few pegs in it between the sizes, so be slightly looser, which would be good for me, I think. But yeah, I wasn't actually sure I was going to be able to get it on. I can't put it like over my head and then pull it back like I would with other headbands, so it is over my hair rather than under it, and I would normally wear it under. But I was a little concerned that if I put it over my head around my neck, I wouldn't then be able to get it off again. So it just went on like a hat, basically. But yeah, no, it does the job. So that's right. Let me show you something else I made on the same loom. I followed a pattern in the book for a hat, and I did it to the length that they said. And this again, it can go on, but it's not long enough for me, and it does stretch out the stitches quite a lot, so we get this like meshy style. This hat's all done with the E-wrap stitch, so this was the true knit, this was the E-wrap. And if I'd had a bigger loom, this would have been fine on me. I mean, it might have been better if I'd have done a couple of extra inches in length, but I am just learning the stitches at the moment, so the point is not necessarily to make stuff for me to use as of yet. I'm sure I can find someone things will fit. But yeah, so that's my loom knitting project done for this week. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. In the meantime, there's this one here that might be of interest to you, and I will see you soon. Until then, happy crafting and bye-bye for now.